Welcome everyone to Claims Corner. Today's featured topic is Agile leadership. We're talking about what it takes to be an Agile leader in today's operating environment. It truly is a shift from doing Agile to being Agile. My name is Alan Demers, and I'm joined today by Lenny Richileau. Lenny is Vice President, Industry Consulting for Insurance at Commerce Bank. Lenny, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. Before we get started, maybe talk a little bit about yourself and Commerce Bank.
Sure. So I've about 25 years of insurance industry experience before I came over to Commerce. Started along the way at the Hanover Insurance and finished my career the last 13 years at Nationwide Insurance, leader there, and worked with you there. And been in claims, underwriting, product along the way, leadership roles in those areas. And spent the last 4 years here at Commerce building out an insurance vertical with heavy emphasis on the claim payments portion of the business. Commerce is a 156-year-old bank and is fully agile, as you would have it, has been for around 20 years, so a very long time. Commerce has a large payments section of their business, so they focus on some non-traditional business you might think of for a bank, and we work in that sector. They started focusing on insurance a little before I got here 4 years ago, and they built out systems specifically for insurance payments and other types of products, including investment products and things like that.
Thank you for that. I think the timing of this topic couldn't be better. Whether you're going through a systems transformation or you're accelerating your innovation agenda, or you're just simply dealing with another hectic CAT cycle and work from home all combined, Agile leadership is certainly in big demand. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on these questions, Lenny, because I know you're focused on the digital claim payment space, and that's a really hot area. So let's kind of begin talking about what Agile leadership is. As I was preparing for the conversation, I noticed there's a number of different descriptions out there. So I'd like to get your perspective on what Agile leadership means.
Yeah, so I think, lots of leaders think they're agile, lots of leaders and companies think they're agile, and I think a lot of what has happened, so obviously since March has been a great test of who truly is agile versus who is practicing. And a lot of that seems to me that it comes from the top. And leaders who in their own decision-making process use a waterfall approach versus a true agile approach, it seems pretty evident. And I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that happens today. And to me, it's almost like agile is the topic, but it can be any process that you do and you make changes for. Is the leader going through the actions and not truly buying in? Or are they buying in wholeheartedly and are willing to change their own decision-making process, including ceding some of their own power to others, mainly the teams, and allowing more freedom of decision-making at a ground level, which truly allows a company to pivot.
Yeah, so you mentioned Commerce Bank is 156 years old. So how can a bank of that age really be agile?
Yeah, and here I think it truly does start with leadership at the very top of the company. They are truly thinking in an agile way. When you look at, for example, how we make our money, as an example of a bank, traditional banks make lots of it from the standpoint of loans and interest and things like that. Commerce makes a full third of their income based on other sectors where it's other types of income, including like payment income. So, they've taken a different approach to how banking works because of the agile process. And when we develop things here, that process truly uses the agile process, but it's also brought into, abilities to make changes swiftly, to address COVID issues.
Lenny, before we get started, please tell us a little bit about yourself and Commerce Bank as well.
Sure. I've got about 25 years of insurance industry experience. I started my career at Citizens Hanover Insurance, and including I went to Markel and then finished my last 13 years at Nationwide prior to joining Commerce. Had held leadership roles in claims and product and underwriting along the way. And of course, worked with you over at Nationwide along the part of my career. And then Commerce is a 156-year-old bank and practices Agile, uses Agile extensively, has for approximately the last 20 years, and has traditional bank services and then also has entire different segments of what we might consider non-traditional banking, like software as a service, which is like part of our claims payments product, what we do there, or insurance payments product, where it's wholly developed and is part of and built by Commerce Bank and part of our fee income process that we use here to generate revenues as well. So, and of course, all of our software is built in an agile environment, and our products and then our business units are in an agile environment.
Great. And, you know, I'm excited to talk to you about this today because I don't think the timing could be better. You know, whether you're going through a systems transformation or you're accelerating your innovation agenda, or you're just keeping pace with work from home and this hectic cat cycle that we're seeing in 2020, agile leadership is in big demand. And I know in your case, you've been focused heavily on digital claim payments, and that's a really hot area. So as I was looking at the questions here and preparing, I noticed that there's a lot of different definitions out there for agile leadership. And so if we could, what's your perspective in defining agile leadership? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, and I think so. So when I look at agile leadership from from a leader's perspective, is the director or the vice president or whoever it is that's leading the project or leading the charge, are they using a waterfall mindset in their decision-making process versus a true agile process, where some of their decision-making, some of their power, if you will, is taken away and is truly given to the teams, so the teams can pivot and make decisions on their own, and with some input. It truly changes how fast a company can move, and we've seen that during these last months here with COVID and other events that have taken place. Companies that truly practice and are agile versus those that have agile frameworks but don't really use them.
Yeah, I picked up on this idea of, abundance, thinking of a mindset of abundance where anything is possible. And I think, shifting into work from home through your business continuity kind of gives you that mindset where all of a sudden it doesn't really matter so much how much it costs. You really need to get up and running to serve your customers. And you also mentioned, Lenny, that Commerce is a 150-year-old bank. So I'd be interested to hear how 150-plus-year bank can be an agile organization.
Yeah, so I think it starts at the very top of our company. They truly buy into the agile methodologies and truly do empower the teams in the way that we go through business. And looking at non-traditional things, I mean, it's not a common theme for a bank of any age to build software. And here we are building software that's very cutting edge in the way it's approached and what it's done with it. And then even in the way we run our teams. And, I looked at things during COVID and how we were able to move to meet the needs of our customers when they needed it the most. And some of those people weren't even customers when we started the process. They literally called us and said, we need help. And we were able to pivot because it was the teams at the front line that were pivoting, and they were empowered to do so.
So how have you seen Agile in practice at Commerce for both your employees and your customers?
Sure. So I think from an employee perspective, it's barely noticing a difference from somebody sitting in an office versus in their home. It's the systems that are in place. It's the changes that need to be made. Because obviously, as a bank, you work in a highly secure environment. We want to protect everybody's money. So all the security things that needed to take place happened very, very quickly. And I know they did it at other companies as well. But I think the big difference is there was no loss of productivity. We continued to roll out our software, as an example. We continued with iterations. We continued to issue contracts. All those things never stopped. And as a matter of fact, many things accelerated because, again, there were companies out there that really contacted us and said, "Can you help us today?" So, a process that may take another company, any company, many months to do, we're literally done in weeks. Everything from issuing COVID payments, the reimbursement payments for premiums that we did for multiple companies. We issued, well in excess of 1 million payments in a very, very quickly, very, very short period of time. That's going from nothing to doing that. And there were other areas of the bank too. Obviously, we had bank operations that had to continue in branches to continue to service the public to allow them access to their funds. So all those different branches throughout the country that we have, those had to continue to operate too, and making sure people there were safe when they did that.
One of the key tenets of agile leadership is being able to learn from your mistakes, make them and learn from them. And I know you have a broad perspective working with a number of different companies out in the industry. So what kind of mistakes did you see relative to COVID, especially in the early days?
Yeah, so I think it was the inability to pivot. And some of that people get caught up in systems, right? So they have legacy systems that are not well adaptable to work from home environments, and companies were making the mistake that was a stopper instead of looking at it as opportunities to use different softwares that they didn't even have in house that weren't necessarily made for the application that was needed, but it allowed them to would have allowed them to make changes to allow a better experience for the people working from home or wherever they had to work, whatever they had to do. Lingering people into offices at higher risks because the leaders wouldn't get. This is probably kind of harsh, because the leaders wouldn't get out of the way. The leaders wanted to maintain command and control versus allowing the teams to pivot, the frontline teams who maybe understood the day-to-day workflow better. And that, I think that was the biggest mistake, that just that command and control need and an inability to pivot because the leader really hadn't bought into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you had to acquire a whole new skill set overnight. And, the idea of just using video to work remotely, but applying the same leadership principles may not work as well as it needs to. So that makes sense.
Well, the interesting thing too is when we talk about productivity, and I just read some things talking about pivoting. I read some things that one of our competitors, JP Morgan, is talking about how fast they want people to come back to the office, and how much that's needed. And I wonder about that. I think there's going to be a lot of people who want to come back to the office, and there's going to be a whole bunch of others who are high performers who don't. And I think a company's inability to measure somebody's productivity while working at home is an opportunity for them to make changes, because there are, and I know some very successful companies. Matter of fact, I have a very friend who's a president of a subrogation company who's been doing it for years and can measure everything that a person does and measure productivity when that person's at home and ensure that that's happening. So I think, change your mindset on how we look at things and how we look at work from home even, and how we measure productivity.
Yeah, that's interesting. Claims has always been pretty good at measuring productivity from a high level, how many claims, cycle times, how long it takes to do things. But certainly when you think about call centers and other operations that aren't accustomed to working from home, or just folks that have focused on innovation and decision loops and things that require meetings and activities, being able to measure those things from a productivity standpoint in a distributed environment seem to make sense as well. So how about on the examples of things that went well, or some good examples of agility during COVID? What comes to mind?
Yeah, so I think interestingly, and I use the example of some folks that were using our software for payments. The pivot to move significant amounts of dollars and the changes in the entire work environment. They enhanced to what they were calling fast track claims. There were enhancements around how they process those claims without people actually being present, changing how they even did digital photographs to allow more claims to become virtual versus having to expose people potentially to COVID, especially in the early days when we were still learning lots about it. So you saw companies pivot and do those things to allow their customers to be able to have a touchless environment, receiving a payment, to receiving their estimates, and going forward with life without disruption. And even ourselves, we were able to pivot again to make some big changes for some folks that weren't even customers, to allow them to jump onto our system very quickly, and even other processes for them, because they weren't able to handle it. So for us, it was a great opportunity to show how Agile really works and how a truly agile functioning company can move to better service and to help everyone.
Yeah, you just mentioned something there about virtual inspections. There's a big theme out there of touchless claims, self-services. All of these things can only be complemented by digital claim payments. And so during COVID, you saw an acceleration. Talk about that a little bit, and then how can we take advantage at this stage of moving to more digital payments to complement some of the other work that many of the insurance companies have done.
Yeah, and I think it's more than just the payments too, right? I mean, it's if we really think about what's happened over the last multiple months here, when you look at the amount of digital commerce that has occurred, and it's become what was already being adopted has now become the norm, right? The amount of Amazon transactions, how people pay their bills, cash is literally becoming so such a smaller amount of what's being transacted. People are even using credit cards in the same way, touchless through their phone. Obviously, a lot of things happening across the internet. And there's a lot more trust and security measures that are there. So when you think about a claims environment, starting that claims in a touchless manner from the standpoint that person taking their photographs and moving all of their process to a more digital, where they're receiving notifications, text messages, all these things. To end with a check is kind of a anticlimactic way to finish a claim that has been completely touchless as you look at that. So it's almost a necessary thing that has to happen. So it kind of solves the argument to get customer demand that says, hey, I don't want a check, I want something else. Or I don't want somebody at my house to inspect the vehicle, just take my pictures. I want to deal with fewer people. And again, it's not, I don't think it's necessarily at this point even going to be the COVID piece of it. It's just people have always been busy and have busy lives, and these things take, having somebody come out or having somebody do something else comes out. And Alan, through my career at Nationwide, I was an early adopter onto digital and video and things like that across the wave. So this is near and dear to my heart about what's happening now, and it's something that should have happened many years ago. But again, we got in our own way. We're more worried about indemnity dollars not being that we were convinced they couldn't be captured correctly using digital means versus somebody being live. And we had to get out of our own way to find out that that's not the case, that it can be done very, very well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this has been an environment that's really thrust everyone in to learn how to use the tools better. And it's just like we're doing right now, where we would normally do this in person, but we're doing it through video, and that works just as well. Back to the Agile leadership piece, Lenny, what advice would you give those who are maybe struggling or haven't quite adopted the Agile leadership methodologies? How do they get started? The where's, the when's, the how's?
Yeah, so I'll start with the how's and the what. So for example, we're always willing to talk to people as a company who truly uses Agile and truly is Agile from the standpoint of how we show it in our business every day. We have an entire training department that is free. They'll talk to folks They will provide guidance, offer what we know in a sharing environment, and also offer other resources. So there's lots of resources out there. But from a leadership's perspective, and I think it's agile or whatever other method you might choose, you personally as a leader have to buy in. You have to be willing to change your decision-making process because, agile, everybody thinks it's the process, it's the meetings, it's the Kanbans, it's the morning meetings, all this other stuff that, the cycles and things. All that's great, but you can't be agile without truly the leader changing the way they think about how they lead and not being waterfall in their own approach. If you need to control everything around you and you don't have trust in your teams and in the process, you lose. You're never going to be agile, and your teams will never be agile. You'll never truly be able to go from practicing to being. And I think that's what the aim is. You have to be willing to change yourself, and that's the highest level leaders need this buy-in, and they need to be involved. Don't make assumptions that I read a book, so I'm good. It's practicing every single day, and being reflective in how you look at what you're doing. Are you truly reflecting on your approach? Are you constantly challenging yourself in your decision-making process? Am I being agile? Am I practicing what I preach in my very actions? And your teams will see that every single day.
The two that kind of stand out to me, and you're talking about skill sets and what it takes to adapt. I mean, one of them is truly having this network of autonomous teams where they can make decisions and be empowered. And those aren't necessarily new leadership principles, but they're really getting pressed. And then the other one is giving them the power to make those decisions along the way. And that is interesting for like a claims organization that has authority and hierarchy. And so those are two big areas to me that stand out where, as you say, the leader really has to change how they practice.
Yep. And you can do it, because we always worry, somebody once told me trust but verify, and you'll know who that is. When you think about things, and you can do that in an agile environment. You can trust that, and you can still verify in the background. There's lots of ways to do that to make sure that your teams are getting things done the way they should be, but it doesn't mean that you stand in the way. It changes how you view what you do and how you approach, from being command and control versus, looking in the background and looking at how things are validated and not expecting the team to validate everything to you every step of the way. You need to take a little bit of the work on yourself to make sure that you've set up a process for yourself, for your own decision making, that you can validate in the background what's going on.
Yeah, and it kind of gets back to the topic of making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So a continuous learner mindset, which, really isn't an easy thing to do for large organizations where, you're really looking at everything you do and you really don't want to make mistakes. But if you can learn from them and apply them and, be in an iterative type of cycle, that really is going to help distinguish those that succeed from those that kind of get caught up in that same loop.
Yeah, and I think we have to be open. So I'll give you a little story what happened. I came here, and of course, spend enough time in property claims where lien holders and things like that are involved. I come to work for a bank, and I'm going to tell them about the business. So here I have people that obviously have been here 20, 30 years, and in the banking industry with lots of experience in the banking industry. And we all know what the problems, if you spend any time in property claims, you understand the problems that a mortgage holder or a lien holder can be, and all the paperwork that's involved with that in the process. So I'm going to go change the world. I'm not going to listen to the people that have done this. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to say, you need to change your process. This is horrible. To be frankly put in my place by people who really knew what they were doing and saying, it's not so easy, buddy. That's obviously, I think what's great for us is, now we're coming, to fruition with a system that takes care of that problem, and it truly takes care of it. But it takes somebody to sit down and listen. Even though we've all got great experiences, we have to listen to each other at the leadership level and be able to work with teams to resolve those issues. So, we all have times when we want to be command and control and things like that. We just, we have to be mindful of ourselves every minute of the day. And it just seems sometimes that in the work for a lot of great people, with a lot of great people. Sometimes, when we get in leadership, it seems like there's more command and control, and we forget some of the lessons we should be learning ourselves. And this is hopefully nothing more than a great reminder.
Good points. And so kind of the last topic here is really about, what do you see around the corner for the claims industry, and how can Agile leadership play a role in all that? So what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about insurance, I've said this for a long time, that insurance has killed more great technology than it's ever bought. And by that, I mean that we are slow moving, and lots of companies come with great ideas and don't have the dollars to wait out the claims industry or the insurance industry. So I think the biggest thing that has to happen is there has to be some adoption rate that is better. Obviously, know your partners. It's important to have a well-funded partner. Obviously, a bank is a partner that's 156 years old, has the fortitude to make it through all the processes of an insurance company, because we understand them well. But I think what really has to happen is the technology that's been out now for a couple of years, and I mean this across the board, from digital technologies for claims to become virtual and touchless, all the way through the payment piece. Insurance companies have to be willing to pick those up and run with them. We talk about a lot of these great new technologies coming out, but I think you and I both know there's a lot of companies who haven't taken up the charge yet. And this is just spurring that forward. I truly believe what's going to happen is there's enough companies that are starting that process that there's going to be those that are left behind if they choose to wait and continue the process, the burdensome process that they're in of validation, because the customers aren't going to wait. They're just going to move to other companies. And I think you already see that. You see some of the companies that are being successful with digital and across their entire business set, not just claims, but the entirety of insurance. And the legacy companies who decide they're going to continue with this process of it's going to take me 3 years to make a decision, there isn't 3 years left. And that's just the way I look at it. I really believe we're at that tipping point where technology is going to take over, and you're either in or you're out. And if you're out, you're going to get left behind.
I hear that all the time in my consulting practice, especially from the insurtechs who are saying, the adoption rate and the decision cycle time from insurance companies takes a long period of time. And I think anyone that's worked on the insurance side, you realize that, and there's some good practical reasons why. But I do think accelerating the pace and being able to get on with trying technology pilots that don't last continuously, things that'll help you get out of those decision loops and to make a decision one way or the other, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think that the unfortunate thing is the larger companies obviously have internal politics they have to deal with across everything, and especially when you have systems that touch 4 or 5 different parts of the company. The politics come into the decisions. You get people who have alternative agendas for what they think is important. And the unfortunate thing is some of those players in the room don't think about the customer. They don't think about what it takes to get a customer and keep a customer, and why the customer is there in the first place. As a fellow I used to say all the time, we're in the insurance business, not the technology business. And too many companies forget that. Technology is important, but ultimately, if the technology doesn't serve the customer, it serves no meaning. And that's really, what everybody should be looking at right now. How do I keep my customers? How do I make sure they're happy? And how do I serve them the way they want to? And if you can look at Amazon and you look nothing like Amazon, you're in trouble.
So we'll leave it on that high note. And if I could take that quote from you, so technology is important, but customers matter most. And so we'll leave it on that high note, Lenny. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. I appreciate all of your input. And thanks again for being here.
All right. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the talk.
Okay, great. Thank you.